Hi, my name is Caroline Hayes, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one holding things together. I paid the power bills when my mom's hours got cut at the library. I covered the repair on my sister's leaking roof after a winter storm tore half the shingles off. Every Thanksgiving, I bought the turkey and the pies, even though no one ever asked. They just knew I would. I thought that was what love looked like. Quiet sacrifice. Stepping in before anyone had to feel the pinch. Last Saturday, that belief shattered. It was one of those crisp Oregon afternoons when the salt from the bay hangs in the air and gulls wheel overhead like they own the sky. My husband Mark was driving, one arm draped over the steering wheel. In the back seat, Evan, our 8-year-old, hummed to himself, his little hands turning a Lego pirate ship over and over. We'd just spent the morning at the farmer's market. Evan had picked out a jar of honey for Grandma Linda, saying she'd love the label with the little bee on it. As we turned down my mother's street, I felt that familiar mix of tension and hope. We hadn't been over in a few weeks, not since that awkward dinner where my sister Victoria handed Mom a crisp $100 bill and a pretty card and got a standing ovation, while my $1,200 transfer 2 days earlier for her overdue utilities went unmentioned. I told myself maybe this visit would be different, but as Mark slowed in front of the house, my stomach dropped. There, lined up on the porch like a yard sale no one bothered to attend, were our things. 2 suitcases, 3 plastic garbage bags sagging at the corners, a laundry basket with Evan's stuffed animals peeking out, their little button eyes staring at me, and on top of the pile, the woven picnic blanket we'd used for every 4th of July since Evan was a baby, folded neatly like an afterthought. Mark cut the engine. The silence was loud enough to drown out the gulls. "Mom, why is our stuff here?" Evan's voice was small but clear from the back seat. I couldn't answer. My hands were already on the door handle. Before I could knock, the front door opened. Mom stood there, framed in the doorway, wearing her pale blue cardigan, the one I'd given her last Christmas. Her face was calm, almost too calm. "It's time you stood on your own, Caroline," she said, as if she were reading from a script she'd practiced. "We talked about this." I blinked. "No, Mom, we didn't." From behind her, Victoria appeared, arms crossed over her chest, lipstick perfect. "You've been here too long," she said. "It's not personal. We voted." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You voted?" "Majority said it was time," Victoria replied, like she was discussing the winner of a bake-off. "We have to prioritize stability." I could feel Mark step up beside me, his presence solid but silent. My phone buzzed in my pocket. When I pulled it out, there was a message from my cousin Nora, someone I'd barely spoken to in months. It was a screenshot of a group text I'd never been added to. "We all agree she has to go. Don't drag it out. She's had long enough. She's not even pulling her weight. It's sad. Below it, I'll handle it. Just act normal around her." Evan shifted his Lego ship in his hands. Did I do something bad? I crouched down to meet his eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat. "No, sweetheart, not you." He looked toward the door, where Mom and Victoria stood like sentinels. "Why won't they let us in?" I had no answer. We loaded what we could into the back of our SUV. Evan clutched the jar of honey in his lap like it might explain something. Mark started the engine and we pulled away, the bay wind rattling through the cracked window. We didn't go home, not really. We went to the Seabreeze Inn, a roadside motel halfway between town and the highway. The kind of place where the curtains smell faintly of salt water and cleaning spray, and the carpet is thin enough that you can feel the boards underneath. Inside, Evan lay on the bed, still holding the honey jar. Mark sank into the only armchair, scrolling his phone without speaking. I sat at the little table under the buzzing wall lamp, staring at nothing. That was the moment it sank in. I hadn't just been overlooked. I'd been erased. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Motel pillows are always too flat, the air too dry. Evan slept curled up, one hand still on the honey jar as if keeping it close could keep the world steady. I watched him and thought about every quiet yes I'd given my family over the years. Every bill paid without fanfare. Every late-night pickup when Victoria couldn't make it for her own kids. Every holiday meal cooked and cleaned away while everyone else drifted to the living room. And now, with one conversation I never got to be part of, I was voted out of my own family. I didn't cry. Not yet. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the hurt was too big to fit into tears. When Evan finally stirred, I forced a smile. "You want pancakes?" "Can we have them at Grandma's?" he asked, half asleep. I hesitated, then shook my head. "Not today, buddy." Mark glanced at me over the rim of his coffee cup but didn't say anything. He rarely did after nights like that. I think silence was his way of coping. Later, when Evan was distracted with the motel's ancient vending machine, I stepped outside. The morning air was cool, damp from the night's mist. Out on the bay, the fishing boats were already heading out, their engines low and steady. I stood there, arms wrapped around myself, watching them disappear into the fog, and wondered if that was what I'd have to do too, slip quietly away and pretend it was my idea. That evening, I opened my phone again. The screenshot from Nora was still there. I read it one more time, letting the words sink all the way in. We all agree she has to go. I didn't know it yet, but that sentence would be the match. The thing that made me stop waiting for someone else to see my worth and start gathering proof that I'd been here all along. The morning after we moved into the Seabreeze Inn, Evan asked if we could go see Grandma. I told him no again. He didn't argue, just went back to building his Lego pirate ship on the motel floor, the hum of the mini fridge filling the quiet. Mark had already left for work. He'd picked up an extra shift at the boatyard. That left me alone with my thoughts and the faint smell of salt water that clung to everything here. It's strange how, when something breaks, your mind starts pulling old cracks into focus. That morning, memories came in flashes, sharp enough to sting. I remembered last Thanksgiving. The house had been crowded, the kitchen thick with the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon pies. I'd spent 2 days prepping, brining the bird, making 3 sides from scratch, and baking cornbread the way Mom liked it. When I walked in carrying the dishes, Victoria was already there, leaning against the counter in a cream sweater, wine glass in hand. She'd brought one pie from the bakery in town. "That looks nice," Mom had said, taking the box from her with both hands and smiling like she'd just been given the crown jewels. She didn't even glance at my cornbread. Later, at the table, the compliments flew, toward Victoria's store-bought pie. I'd smiled, kept passing the gravy, and told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. Then there was the Sunday in March. I was in the kitchen making a casserole for the church luncheon when my phone buzzed. It was Mom, her voice tight. "Caroline, the power company's threatening to shut me off. Can you send something today?" I didn't even think. I transferred $1,200 through the bank app. 2 days later, we had a family dinner. Victoria handed Mom a crisp $100 bill tucked into a gold envelope. "Oh, you're always so thoughtful," Mom said, voice full of warmth. She never mentioned my transfer, not even a nod in my direction. There were smaller things, too, the kind that chip away over time. Evan never had a seat at family dinners. Every time, I'd look around the table. 6 places set perfectly, napkins folded into little fans, silverware gleaming, no extra chair, no booster. "He can sit with me," I'd say, pulling him into my lap. Victoria would smirk. "That's charming." I told myself it didn't matter as long as he was fed. But the truth is, it wasn't just about a seat. It was about being seen. Back at the motel, I sat at the small desk, the morning light streaming through the thin curtains. Evan was still playing on the floor, humming to himself. I pulled out my notebook, the one I usually kept grocery lists in, and started writing down everything I'd done for my family over the past 2 years. Power bills, car repairs, groceries, school supplies for Victoria's twins, gas money for Mom when she needed to get to a doctor's appointment. By the time I stopped, I had 3 full pages. It looked less like a list and more like a record of every time I'd said yes, every time I'd stepped in to fix a problem, every time they'd taken it like it was their due. Later that afternoon, Mark came back from work smelling faintly of diesel and salt water. "You're making lists now?" he asked, glancing at the notebook. "Just trying to remember," I said. "Remember what?" "All the times they forgot me." He didn't answer, just rubbed the back of his neck and said he needed a shower. That evening, Evan wandered over with the jar of honey he'd bought for Grandma. He held it out to me like it was still waiting to be delivered. "Can we take it to her tomorrow?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "Not tomorrow, buddy." "Will she like it when she gets it?" I nodded. "She'll like it." But inside, I wasn't so sure anymore. That night, I dreamed about sitting at Mom's kitchen table. Everyone else was laughing, passing dishes, making plans. My plate was empty. When I tried to speak, no one looked at me. Then, one by one, they stood up and left, their chairs scraping against the tile, until it was just me and Evan. I woke up with the taste of metal in my mouth. The next morning, I decided to run an errand in town while Evan stayed with Mark's cousin for a few hours. I stopped by the little coffee shop near the marina. It's the kind of place where the same 3 regulars sit by the window every morning, and the barista already knows your order by the time you reach the counter. I had just settled into a corner table when I heard a laugh I'd know anywhere. Victoria, she was sitting 2 tables over, back to me, her voice carrying in that bright, deliberate way people use when they want to be overheard. "Of course I used her money," she said. "She's too soft to fight back. Always has been." I didn't move, didn't even breathe. My hand slid into my bag, fingers closing around my phone. One tap, and the voice memo app was recording. I set it on the table, screen down. 42 seconds later, I had something I'd never had before. Proof. When I got back to the motel, Evan was building a Lego fort on the bed. Mark was scrolling his phone, his face unreadable. I sat down at the desk, opened my notebook, and drew a line under the last entry. Then I wrote, "Victoria Coffee Shop 42-second recording." It was the first time my list felt like more than just a list. It felt like a plan. If you've ever been made invisible in your own family, you know it doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow fade, a seat missing here, a thank you that never comes, a story told without your name in it. But sometimes it only takes one moment, a overheard sentence, a little too much truth spoken out loud to snap everything into focus. For me, that moment had just happened. 3 days after I recorded Victoria at the coffee shop, the rain came back. Not the gentle, misty kind we get most mornings in our town, but a steady, drumming downpour that turned the streets into slick ribbons and made the bay disappear into a sheet of gray. Evan was curled up on the motel bed with his coloring book, tongue sticking out in concentration as he filled in a lighthouse with uneven stripes. Mark had gone to the boatyard again, leaving the room unusually quiet except for the low hum of the heater. I've been trying to distract myself with job listings, scrolling past ads for seasonal retail work and part-time bookkeeping. But my mind kept circling the same question. How long had they been planning to cut me out? It wasn't just the group chat, it was deeper than that. I opened my email mostly to clear out the junk that piled up when you ignore it for too long. I clicked into a forgotten folder, one I hadn't touched in years. And there it was, a subject line that made my chest tighten. Draft, Hayes Estate, for review. Dated April 2018. I remembered that spring. My grandfather, George Hayes, had been in and out of the hospital for his breathing. He'd called me one afternoon, asked if I could help with a new oxygen machine that Medicare wouldn't fully cover. I'd wired the money that night, and he'd cried on the phone, saying I'd saved him. I clicked the email. The PDF opened slowly, the motel Wi-Fi struggling. There it was in black and white. Primary beneficiary, Caroline Hayes. Grandpa's house, The little cedar-shingled place by the harbor left to me. I sat back, heart thudding. That house wasn't just a piece of property. It was where I'd spent every summer mowing the lawn, painting the porch rails, helping him fix the screen door when the sea air made it stick. I could still smell the cedar from his workshop, hear the gulls calling in the morning. I clicked back to the folder. Another email caught my eye. Revised, Hayes Estate, final draft. Dated October 2018, 6 months later. When it opened, my name was gone. Replaced with primary beneficiary, Victoria Hayes. I stared at the screen, blinking like maybe the letters would rearrange themselves, but they didn't. My mind started pulling the pieces together. That fall, Victoria had suddenly become a regular at Grandpa's. She'd bring over pastries from that overpriced bakery downtown, always with her old college friend who just happened to be an estate lawyer. She'd post pictures on Facebook, her pouring him tea, her helping him sort through old photo albums. I told myself at the time that maybe she was trying to connect, but now, the timing was too perfect, too calculated. I printed both versions at the library that afternoon. The librarian glanced at me, then at the legal document sliding from the printer tray, but didn't say a word. Back at the motel, I spread them out on the desk. Side by side, the difference was stark. My name cleanly swapped for hers, as if I'd never been in the picture. Evan wandered over, chewing on a granola bar. "What's that, Mom?" "Just some papers I needed to find," I said, sliding them into a manila folder before he could see more. That night, after Evan fell asleep, I called Monica, a woman I used to work with at the insurance office. She'd gone back to school to become a paralegal. When she answered, her voice was warm but wary. "Caroline? It's been ages. I need some advice," I said, "and I think it might be complicated." I told her about the 2 wills, about the dates, about the lawyer friend of Victoria's. She didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finished, she said, "Save everything. Email me the files tonight. And Caroline, don't tell them you found it." After I hung up, I forwarded both PDFs to her and backed them up on a flash drive I'd kept in my purse since college. Then, for good measure, I uploaded them to a cloud account I hadn't used in years. When people take everything from you, the only thing left is clarity, and I finally had it. The next morning, the rain had stopped. The air smelled sharp, like wet pavement and salt. Evan begged to go down to the pier to watch the fishing boats come in, so we bundled up and walked the few blocks from the motel. He leaned over the railing, pointing out every seagull, every crab trap being hauled up. I stood beside him, but my mind wasn't on the water. It was on the folder in my bag, heavy with paper and proof. Later that day, Mark came home early. "Your Aunt Elaine's having a barbecue," he said. "She told me to bring you and Evan. Maybe it'll help smooth things out." I wanted to laugh. Smooth things out? After everything. But Evan's face lit up at the idea of seeing his cousins. So I said yes. Elaine's backyard smelled like charcoal and cedar smoke. Kids ran between the picnic tables, and someone was already passing around paper plates piled with burgers. I spotted Victoria near the grill, dressed like she was headed to a brunch in the city. Silk blouse, gold earrings, catching the light. In her hands, she held a wrapped box. A few minutes later, she handed it to her daughter, who tore off the paper to reveal a brand new rose gold tablet. The crowd clapped. Evan tugged my sleeve. "Mom, that looks like the one we bought for Aunt Elaine in May." I frowned, stepping closer. And there it was, still faintly stuck to the underside. The white Amazon tag from our order, the one Mark had signed for. I walked up, calm as the tide before a storm, took the tablet from the girl's hands, turned it over, peeled the tag away. "This belongs to me," I said, my voice even. Silence fell, broken only by the gulls overhead. Victoria blinked. "Oh, I thought it got delivered to our place by mistake." "Must have been a long mistake," I said, sliding it back into the box. "I'll take it from here." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't need to. Sometimes the quietest truths echo the loudest. That night, back at the motel, Evan and I shared fries on the bed while Mark scrolled his phone. I didn't press him. I didn't ask for his opinion. I had something better, a growing pile of proof, and the steady certainty that I was done playing the role they'd assigned me. After the barbecue at Aunt Elaine's, I couldn't unsee the look on Victoria's face when I peeled the Amazon tag off that tablet. It wasn't embarrassment. It was calculation. The quick flicker in her eyes told me she'd already started thinking of how to spin it if anyone asked. I knew then that if I wanted the truth to survive, I had to hold it in my own hands. The next morning, I spread everything out on the motel's small table. 2 wills, printouts of every bank transfer I'd made to Mom in the past 3 years, receipts for school supplies I'd bought for Victoria's kids, even the invoice for the booster seat Evan used to have at Mom's before it went missing. I dug deeper, combing through my email for confirmation numbers, invoices, messages with dates and details. Every little piece mattered. By the time Evan woke up, I had 3 neat stacks: financial proof, physical proof, and what I called truth with a voice. The recordings. That afternoon, I went back to the coffee shop where I'd overheard Victoria, not to see her again, but to ask the barista, an old high school classmate named Molly, if she remembered the day. "Oh, yeah," she said, pulling a muffin from the display case. "You mean when she was sitting by the window with that blonde woman? She was talking loud. I remember because Mr. Fitch in the corner gave her a look." "Would you be willing to write that down?" I asked. Molly hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "Sure. I've got no reason to cover for her." She grabbed a napkin and wrote the date, time, and what she'd heard. It wasn't a sworn affidavit, but it was something. Back at the motel, I emailed Monica everything. Her reply came an hour later. "This is solid. Keep collecting." The more context, the harder it is for them to twist it. So I did. I started checking old text messages, times Mom had asked for a little help with rent, with her car battery, with the electric bill. I screenshotted every one. I found photos from family gatherings where I was holding a casserole, a baby, or a laundry basket, always working in the background while Victoria posed front and center. It hit me then. This wasn't just about money or a house. It was about erasure, about the way my presence had been edited out in real time. A week later, I took Evan to the public library for story hour. While he sat cross-legged on the carpet, listening to the librarian read The Wind in the Willows, I wandered to the back corner where the local archives were kept. The librarian on duty, an older man with kind eyes, let me flip through the town paper's digital files. I typed in Hayes and scrolled. There it was, a photo from the school's new reading corner dedication, Victoria front and center, holding scissors for the ribbon cutting. No mention of the fact that I donated the money through the family account to make it happen. I printed the article and slid it into my folder. That night, Mark asked, "Why are you digging so hard? Can't you just let it go?" I looked at him for a long moment. Letting it go is how we got here. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I'm just saying, it's not worth the fight." "It's worth not being erased," I said. 2 days later, fate handed me another piece of the puzzle. Evan and I were walking back from the pier when I heard a voice behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Victoria again on the phone. "Well, if she really wants to take this to court, good luck to her. She doesn't have a leg to stand on." My pulse kicked up. Without breaking stride, I slipped my phone from my pocket and hit record. "And anyway," she continued, "Dad's on our side. Mom, too. They'll say whatever we need." I ended the recording, labeled it Peer Conversation, and backed it up to the cloud before I even reached the motel. By now, my manila folder was thick enough to bulge at the edges. Monica called that night. "This is shaping up into something real," she said, "but you need to be ready for pushback. They'll hit hard and they'll hit first." "I know," I said. "I'm just tired of being quiet." "Then don't be," she replied. The next weekend, I took Evan to the park. He ran ahead to the swings while I sat on a bench, flipping through my folder again. I noticed something I'd missed before, a receipt for the Cedar rocking chair from Grandpa's porch. I'd bought it as a Father's Day gift years ago. It was still at Mom's house last I saw. It wasn't about the chair itself. It was about proof. Proof that I'd put pieces of myself into that house, into that family, and they decided none of it counted. I wrote it on my list. Rocking chair. Purchased 2015 cedar wood, invoice attached. That evening, as Evan colored on the motel desk, I opened my laptop and started a new document. Timeline of events. I began at the earliest memory that mattered, March 2018, the oxygen machine for Grandpa, and worked forward. Transfers, purchases, recorded comments, photos, articles. By the time I finished, I had 5 pages of dates and details. Looking at it, I realized something. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was my case. One night, after Evan was asleep, I stared at the ceiling and thought about what Monica had said, about them hitting first. I wasn't scared of their words anymore. I was scared of what would happen if I stayed silent. So I decided, if they wanted a fight, I'd bring the truth. Not just for me, but for Evan. So one day, he'd know his mom didn't let herself be erased. By the end of that week, the manila folder wasn't enough. I bought a plastic file box from the dollar store and labeled each section. Financial proof, physical proof, witness statements, audio recordings, media articles. I slid the last document into place and closed the lid. The next step wasn't just collecting anymore, it was using it. And I knew exactly where that would happen. Room 2B, Franklin County Courthouse. The morning of the hearing, the sky over the harbor was a pale, unsettled gray. I stood in front of the motel mirror, buttoning my navy blouse, the same one I'd worn to Grandpa's funeral. No earrings, hair pulled back, no makeup beyond the bare minimum. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted precision. Mark drove me into town. Evan stayed with a neighbor from the motel, busy with coloring books and a plate of pancakes. The courthouse loomed ahead, its brick facade darkened by years of salt air and rain. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and dust. Room 2B wasn't large, but it felt heavy, like every whispered conversation had sunk into its walls. My attorney, Monica, was already there, standing beside the table with a stack of neatly organized binders, everything we'd built over the past month. Victoria was seated across the aisle, silk blouse, perfect lipstick. That same tight smile she wore at the barbecue, only now sharpened. Mom sat beside her, pearls I'd helped pick out for her anniversary resting against her collarbone. Anna Lane and a couple of cousins filled the row behind them, leaning in to whisper. When the judge entered, the room shifted into silence. The bailiff called the case and Monica began. "First," she said, voice steady, "the matter of the Hayes estate." She walked the judge through the 2 wills, April 2018 and October 2018, displaying them side by side on the screen. In the original draft, my client, Caroline Hayes, is listed as the primary beneficiary of her grandfather's home. 6 months later, without discussion or notification, her name is removed and replaced with her sister, Victoria Hayes. I kept my gaze forward, but in the corner of my vision, I saw Victoria cross her legs, unbothered. Monica continued. During those 6 months, Ms. Victoria Hayes began visiting the decedent more frequently, often accompanied by a friend from her college days, an attorney specializing in estate law. We also have records showing these visits increased dramatically after my client purchased medical equipment for her grandfather. She clicked to the next exhibit, a bank transfer receipt dated March 2018 for $2,400. My handwriting in the memo line, oxygen machine for Grandpa. Then came the recordings. The judge listened without expression as Victoria's voice filled the room. "Of course I used her money. She's too soft to fight back. Always has been." No one moved. Even Mom's hands stilled on her lap. Monica laid out the rest, Financial transfers, receipts, photos, the article from the Reading Corner dedication. And then, from her bag, she pulled an envelope. "This," she said, "was left for my client at the motel where she stayed after being told to stand on her own. It contains 2 $20 bills and a note. Hope this helps you get back on your feet. No hard feelings." She handed it to the judge. In the month prior, my client had transferred over 5 times that amount to her mother for utilities, medication, and school supplies for her niece. I could feel the heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my face calm. The judge looked up. "Ms. Hayes, do you have anything you'd like to add?" I stood. From my tote, I pulled a blank check and slipped it into the same envelope. "In case you ever want to return what I gave," I said, turning toward Mom's side of the room, "be sure to adjust for inflation." A few muffled gasps broke the air. I turned back to the table, reaching for one last item. The cedar rocking chair from Grandpa's porch, small enough to carry but solid in my arms. "They claimed this was part of the estate," I said. "I have the receipt showing I purchased it in 2015 for my grandfather, and now it's coming home with me." No one said a word as I walked down the aisle toward the door, the chair cradled like something fragile but wholly mine. The silence felt heavier than any shouting match could have. Outside, the wind from the bay hit my face, sharp and briny. Mark was waiting by the car. "You done?" he asked. "For now," I said, "but not finished." Back at the motel, Evan was sitting cross-legged on the bed, building a Lego dock for his pirate ship. The cedar chair fit perfectly in the corner, like it had been waiting for this room all along. I sank into it, letting the weight in my chest loosen for the first time in months. Some people think justice is loud, gavel bangs, raised voices, doors slammed. But I'd learned something else that day, walking out with the truth intact, untouched, and undeniable. That's louder than anything they can scream. The day after the hearing, I woke up before Evan. The motel room was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. The cedar rocking chair sat in the corner, catching the pale light coming through the curtains. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was sleeping in borrowed space. I made coffee with the small drip machine by the sink, the smell filling the room. Outside, gulls wheeled over the bay, their calls sharp and almost cheerful. By the end of that week, we'd moved into a small apartment above a bookstore 2 streets over from the harbor. The stairs creaked, the windows stuck if you didn't open them just right, and the rent was lower than anything else in town. Evan ran from room to room that first afternoon, his sneakers squeaking against the wood floors. "This one's my room," he announced, standing in a square of sunlight near the window. I set the cedar chair in the living room corner and unpacked our first box. Evan's books, the worn copy of The Very Hungry Caterpillar, the tractor story Grandpa used to read to him, a stack of picture books with creased spines from too many bedtimes. I lined them on a low shelf, just within his reach. We didn't have much furniture yet. The couch was a thrift store find. The kitchen table was one Mark's cousin had given us, mismatched chairs and all. But every piece in that apartment was ours. No one could vote us out. No one could tell us to leave it behind. That first night, Evan and I sat on the couch, eating grilled cheese sandwiches off paper plates. Through the window, the bookstore's sign glowed faintly, and I could hear the muffled sound of pages turning from the shop below. "Do you like it here?" I asked him. He nodded, mouth full. "It feels like hours." I hadn't planned to keep making videos after the one I posted from the motel, but the comments kept coming, each one like a small tap on the shoulder. "You're telling my story. I've been invisible for years, too. Thank you for saying what I couldn't." One morning, after Evan left for school, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and opened a blank project in my editing software. I titled the video, "Strong Starts for Silent Women, Episode 1. I spoke directly to the camera, my voice calm but steady. "If you've carried things no one else even noticed, this is for you. If you've been told to let it go when what they mean is be quiet, this is for you too." I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I told the truth as it happened. The barbecue, the missing seat at the table, the 2 wills. I hit upload and didn't expect much, but by that evening, messages began trickling in again, this time from women in other towns, other states, even other countries. One wrote, "My sister took credit for paying off my mom's hospital bills when it was me. I thought I was crazy for caring. You made me feel sane again." Another said, "I've been waiting for someone to explain how this feels. You just did." The subscriber count ticked upward slowly at first, then faster. By the end of the month, my channel had 11,000 people, then 25,000, then more. Evan would peek over my shoulder while I answered comments. "Do they like your videos, Mom?" "They like the truth," I'd tell him. We built routines. Mornings, I'd walk Evan to school, the salty air filling our lungs. Afternoons, we'd stop by the pier for ice cream if the weather held. Evenings, we'd make dinner together. Nothing fancy, but ours. On weekends, I filmed new episodes while Evan played at a friend's place. Sometimes I'd shoot at the kitchen table, sometimes in the cedar chair, the light from the bookstore window softening the edges of the frame. Every so often, I'd get a text from a cousin or a family friend. "Your mom says she doesn't understand why you're making these videos." I never replied. One afternoon while editing, my phone lit up with a call from Mom. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a transcript popped up on my screen. "We just thought you'd always be here." We didn't know. It wasn't an apology. It was an expectation. That night, Evan and I walked to the park. Spring had finally started to win against the long Oregon winter, and the grass was dotted with bright yellow dandelions. Evan knelt to pick a few, holding them out to me with a grin. "Do you think they'll ever say sorry?" he asked. I looked up at the evening sky, the same one that stretched over the house we'd left, the courthouse, every room where my voice had been smaller than it should have been. "Maybe," I said, "but we're not waiting for it anymore, are we?" He shook his head like it was the most obvious thing in the world and ran off toward the swings. Back home, after he was asleep, I sat at my desk. The cedar chair faced the wall where I'd taped a piece of paper with one phrase, "Don't shrink back." I opened my laptop and began outlining my next series, the Reclaim series, for women who've had enough of being quiet. I typed it slowly, letting each word land. Then I saved the file and leaned back in the chair. It creaked softly, familiar and steady. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting to prove I belonged. I already did. It's been a year since the day I walked out of room 2B with a cedar rocking chair in my arms. A year since the truth sat heavier than their version of it. And a year since I stopped letting other people decide where I stood in my own life. The apartment above the bookstore still creaks when you walk across it, and the windows still stick when the salt air settles in. But it's ours. The smell of books from downstairs drifts up every morning, mixing with the coffee I brew while Evan gets ready for school. The cedar chair sits by the window, the varnish dulled from decades of hands and sun. It's where I write now, scripts for new videos, lists of things I once thought I'd never be able to say out loud. I've learned that speaking up isn't a single act. It's a practice, something you choose. Again and again, even on the days your voice feels too small. Evan's grown taller this year. His shoes don't fit for more than a few months at a time, and he's learned to make perfect scrambled eggs. He tells people, "My mom works for herself," and the pride in his voice is the kind you can't fake. We've built new traditions: Sunday pancakes, Friday night movie marathons, Saturday mornings at the farmer's market. There's a booth that sells fresh-baked bread, and the woman there always tucks an extra roll into our bag for the boy with the big smile. It's the small things that make a place feel like home. The channel has grown beyond anything I imagined. We passed 200,000 subscribers last month. Viewers send stories, photos, even letters. Real, handwritten letters that I keep in a box under my bed. Some tell me they've confronted family members who took advantage of them. Others say they've started saving for their own apartments or left relationships where they were invisible. I read every word because I know what it's like to feel like no one's listening. Every now and then, I hear updates about my family. Victoria tried to sell the house but couldn't get the price she wanted. Mom still hosts Sunday dinners, though I'm told the gatherings are quieter now. No one's reached out in months, and I've realized something. Distance isn't always loss. Sometimes it's space to breathe. One rainy afternoon, Evan asked if we could visit Grandpa's grave. We brought a small bouquet of daisies and the first loaf of bread we'd baked together. I told him stories on the drive, about Grandpa teaching me to bait a fishing hook, about how he always kept lemon drops in his coat pocket, about the summer we built a birdhouse that still hangs in the backyard. At the cemetery, Evan set the bread at the foot of the headstone. "For you," he whispered. On the way back to the car, he slipped his hand into mine. "Do you think Grandpa would be proud of you?" I squeezed his hand. I think he already was. This year has taught me that healing isn't neat. It doesn't happen all at once, and it doesn't always come with a moment of applause. Sometimes healing is just living differently than you did before. It's choosing your peace over their comfort. It's remembering your own name when other people try to erase it. One evening last month, I filmed a video I'd been putting off. It wasn't about the will or the estate or even the family. It was about what came after. I told my viewers, you don't need a title to be the steady one. You don't need permission to stand where you belong. And you don't need their version of the story to be the truth for it to be real. If you're tired of waiting for them to see you, start living like you've already been seen. I ended it the way I always do now. You matter, and your love leaves a mark. Sometimes I still think about the night I left my mother's house for the last time. Evan's hand in mine, the air sharp and cold. Back then, I thought I was walking into nothing. Now I know I was walking towards something else, something better. Not perfect, not without struggle, but ours. The cedar chair creaks under me now as I write this. The bookstore's light flickering through the window. Evan's laughter drifts from the kitchen where he's mixing pancake batter for tomorrow. A year ago, I thought justice was getting back what they took. Now I understand. It's building something they can't take away. And that's exactly what we're doing. We've walked through a journey of loss, truth, and quiet strength. Caroline learned that justice isn't always about reclaiming what's taken. It's about building something no one can take away. If you've ever been overlooked, erased, or told to let it go, remember this: your voice matters, and your love leaves a mark. Start living like you've already been seen. Thank you for watching. If this story spoke to your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. And never forget, you matter more than they ever admitted.